G'day guys, welcome back to In My Shed. I'm BC. This is a bit of a follow-up. I had one of my subscribers asking for the nitty-gritty. How about some close-ups? We don't want to look at you, we want to look at what you're doing. Thank you very much. But I can understand that. So this is a follow-on from a previous video, only sometimes the grinder won't be running because you won't hear me. And I'll show you a quick table stop that I thought up and a few other items. For those that are interested in tool and cutter grinding, I've put all my videos in a playlist now, and there's 85 tool and cutter grinder videos, and that's after leaving out the boring ones. So it's a good way to get in on a quick look up if you want to see a subject that I might have covered. All the titles are there. Now, for those of you with Clarkson tool and cutter grinders, making the most out of our Clarkson cutter grinder. It's a little booklet. I think it came with the machine. At first I thumbed through it and I thought, load of crap, not necessary. But it is really good for a couple of reasons. If I can find it. Very good chart for release and clearances. That's offsetting the height of your wheel to grind a curve behind the cutting edge. Very good information. Very simple to make. Angle setting gauge, another good bit of information, and it does give, or it calls it a manual of how to do tool and cutter grinding, but not really. But for each operation, it's got a list of the items you use and the order of operation. Now, at first I couldn't figure out how Clarkson did the grinding, and then I had another look after reading it for probably the fourth time, assembled the tools that they said to use. Bingo, it all just dropped into place. And as I said the last time, my main problem was having too long an extension out of the workhead. So if you can get one of those, they are really good. The chart in the back, that simple angle setting gauge, and the instructions there make it a lot easier to get the grinder operating. And while I've got your splendid attention, I'm going to do another video of abrasive machining 3, and it's going to be on this fabulous book, Norton's book on cutting off. And you'll all say, oh, we know all about cutting off, we use 125 by 1 mil cut off wheels. Well, this was brought out long before that, and I've actually seen a grinder in a foundry, Westinghouse Brake and Signal, that was cutting off 100 mil diameter manganese steel casting risers. It was in its own little enclosure, 60 kilowatt motor, flood coolant and hydraulic downfeed. And those very heavy casting risers are cut in about 10 seconds and almost a mirror finish. So industrial cutting off is a damn sight more than just 125 by 1 cut-off wheels. There's a lot of good information in here, so I'll do a video of that over the next week when I can. So enough gas bagging. I'll do this video in the reverse of the order of the last video because the big body clearance grinding should be the first operation. Bring you around for some close-ups. Okay, we'll start off with a little bit of a workaround. As I said, the big disappointment here was a lack of table stops. So this is just a milling vice stop that you can set up on the table and use that to bang up against the casting. I've also swung it over and worked underneath the table up against the base of the tool and cutter grinder. So quite a good item. It was reasonably cheap. I couldn't make one that good for the $80 or $90 that it cost me. Okay, what are we trying to achieve here? On all of these cutters, you have a primary angle, a secondary angle, and then a fair portion gets ground away from the body so the secondary clearance isn't too long. Now that's normally at about 45 degrees. I could manage to get it at 35 degrees underneath the wheel, and that is the rake face or the flute of the cutter, and the inner part of that is ground away either at 0 rake or at about 5 degrees. If you want to set up with the cutter on a greater angle, you can grind a bit more rake into it But look, it's difficult for me anyway, and I don't think it's at any great advantage. That part of the cutter does not quite often do much work, except if you're drilling, in which case I would put a bit more positive clearance in there. And also, when you do this bit of grinding, you don't have to be too fussy with the secondary clearance. If this isn't ground back far enough, you can get a bit of a heel kicking up. Well, it's quite easy just to offhand grind that off on a bench grinder rather than muck about with a tool and cutter grinder to try and get it done right. Okay, as I said in the previous video, I don't have this face dead vertical. I normally crank it back about 3 degrees, and that allows you to grind right into that corner without taking the tip off. And you want this part of the flute to remain as much as possible, because that gives you the helix angle or the rake angle in front of the cutting edge. So I'll move over closer, put it under the wheel, and you'll get a bit of a better idea of what was happening. Well, that's a surprise. I don't normally get things this well focused. Let's hope I don't muck it up. Okay, this is the area I'm talking about. You'll notice that it's flat, and I pass it underneath the grinding wheel. Yep, you can see that. Pass underneath the grinding wheel, so it grinds flat up to this edge, which is the gullet of the flute. Now, as I said earlier, I don't have that dead vertical. I come back about 3 degrees. That gives you a little bit of clearance. Now, it's not the nicest operation, especially as that area is wider than the width of this grinding wheel, but I had to use this little wheel because I couldn't get enough height on the grinder. You use the down feed on the top of the grinder to feed the wheel vertically, pass it underneath the wheel, and then I crank the tool sideways to grind the other half, drop it on the thou again, grind it, move it across, and grind again. Now, I don't even index with this operation. I just lock it up with the clamping bolt on top of the workhead. I'll back you out for that. I just lock the cutter up with this bolt that moves onto the shaft inside the workhead, grind one side, loosen it, tighten it up again, and that gets you near as hell as you need it. Quite a simple operation. Now, Clarkson also talk about bolting the wheel head directly to the table for this operation. That I haven't done so far, but I think you could only do that if you were plunging into this, which means grinding in that direction, not pushing through under the wheel. And I don't like that on a machine that doesn't have mechanical stops. It's too easy to bugger it up. Another video up on YouTube today of a pedestal grinder wheel exploding as a fellow pushed a piece of steel into it really hard. And man, you want to look at those videos, you'd appreciate the safety involved. Okay, we'll move over to doing the flutes on the other machine and show you that. Okay guys, this is another TV simulated demonstration. I haven't got the wheel running because it's too much cramped. Too much gear in such a small place. Okay, my little pointer again. There's the cutting edge. And if you want to get it up, we had a bit of a fall over. Okay, now we're recording. There's the cutting edge. And if you want to get it reasonably accurately centered, I use a little pocket level like that. I'm indexing off the rear indexing disc, which I'll show you in a second. And I've got one of the spring stops set for when the edge of the cut-off wheel, grinding wheel rather, just gets to the groove in the middle of the two flutes. And then for the other side, which is a little bit longer, I push against the spring of the stop. And that'll give me about an extra millimetre or two that I need. Come out of the job, release the indexing wheel. come around till it locks in again, lock it up, and bring the wheel out a little bit more. At the moment it's set to 20 degrees, which is what I ground the secondaries at. It's just touching the wheel. There, she's released. And I just tilt the head down to get the lower angle for the primaries. So there's no real magic in it. So I'll bring you out now to look at the stops and the indexing wheel, and then I'll put the GoPro footage at the end of the video. Not behaving well this time. Okay guys, this is a bit of a better look at the indexing mechanism. Now there's two ways I can index it. There's index it with this pin, and it only has two positions. So I set up to lock on the pin, and you just pull it out, turn it and drop it back in again, and it locks. Then you spin the work 180 degrees and drop the pin back in again. I'm using this indexer here because that can be a bit of a struggle, and I don't like struggling when you've got a spinning wheel in front of you. So this knob here locks the indexing lever, so it's under the knob, the lever drops out, index the work, and then lock it again. I'll bring the camera around the back here and show you the locking mechanism. It's quite unique actually. So it's not too hard. Don't over concentrate. That's the big thing. Look at the work, listen, like I didn't do a couple of videos ago, and it's not that difficult. It takes a lot of practice to get reasonably good at it. Okay, I'll show you this indexing ring. I might have to drop the cutter down to get better access. Okay, we're back at it again. We'll zoom down first at the spring-loaded stops. Okay, when I work the hand wheel, you come up against the spring-loader stop, and if you want to grind it a little further, you can just push the grinder that little bit. Now, it's a very, very heavy table. Originally, they were the table stops, and banging up against that solid stop, I just wasn't comfortable with it. So these are very, very easily adjustable, and you can also change the spring tension on them. Okay, up to the indexing gear. That's got it at last right where I want it, and just back out a little bit. Okay, you can see the main body indexing is up there. This is the indexing ring with the slots cut into it, and it's quite unique in that there's like an inner and outer shaft, and you can adjust the relationship between the indexing wheel and the inner shaft just by loosening that lock nut or lock bolt and working these socketed cap screws. So you can change it a few degrees, and that's how you do gear cutters. You can adjust it to maintain the rank but index as well. Okay, this lever goes through a pivot, and there's a dog that drops into the slot. Now in here is a little snail slot and a pin, and that's how it locks in. You bring it across on the lever, and turn the latch. The latch runs down the cam and locks it in place. Up it comes. Index around 180. Lock it in and do it up. It's a nice big workhead. It's got less than 1/100 of a millimetre in run out, even with that cheap chuck of mine in there. It does a beautiful job, but it's very cumbersome to use. I'm used to indexing off the flute of the cutter, which is substantially easier, but I don't think quite as accurate as what we're getting here. Okay guys, I hope that explains a little bit more about tool and cutter grinding. When I first started this, it was described to me as 10% science and 90% art. Well, most machining operations are, I suppose, but it does take a lot of experience to get reasonably good at it, and it takes a lot more experience to be good at it and not make mistakes. That's the hard part. It's very, very easy to bugger it all up. I'll keep working with this grinder. I think for some of my operations it'll be very, very good, especially where I want to take a bit of material off. It's so much more rigid than the little Clarkson or the other grinders up there, the wrong food. They're good for annular cutters, but even simple operations like dressing the grinding wheel, they bloody chatter like hell. Makes it a little bit difficult. I've put, as I said, 85 videos into a playlist. Makes it easy to get through, and you might be able to learn a bit from there. If you've got any questions, put them in the comments, by all means. So soon it'll be Abrasive Machining 3, and whatever else I can put up for the video. Bye for now. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, please.